Would you say in general that's, let's say, one of the most critical conditions for an effective CMO CEO collaboration?
Do you want me to start? I think there's,
Sure.
Throughout the journey, Frank, I know you want to, we don't want to paint that everything's always rosy. There's always highs and lows as we go through a transformation like we have done. Mm-hmm. And I think, Alex and I have made it a point to just have really regular touch points on the critical topics that we need to work together to move us through to get to the next phase. Mm-hmm. Going through the work that we did, we had different periods where, we had operational roadblocks or dependencies within other business partner relationships that our team has with other parts of the business, in sales operations, in finance, in HR. Marketing is one of those functions that touches and supports every single aspect of the business.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to all viewers from all around the world. My name is Frank van den Driest, and I'm very pleased to have you with us at the Humanizing Growth Series, and especially pleased with my guests of today, two guests, Kirsten Allegri Williams and Alex Atzberger, respectively CMO and CEO of Optinaut, the company that helps clients unlock their digital potential. Now, more about that later. But let me first ask you, Kirsten, how are you?
I'm doing great, Frank. Really well. Thanks for having us.
Great. Well, great to have you. And Alex, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic as well, Frank. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Great, good. Alex, a question to you. I mean, just looking around us and what's happening, we've had COVID, the new report by the IPCC about climate change came out, and it's pretty worrying, if I may say. And then we've got war in Europe. What's that mean for you and for Optinaut?
Yeah. I think, Frank, first of all, I think we as humans, we are all connected when you think about the issues as you mentioned, from climate change to war. And it just sometimes put things in perspective, to be honest. I talk to my employees that we have a company that continues to have opportunities and challenges like any other company has. But sometimes you need to kind of step back and recognize that there are issues that are just bigger than any one company or any one person. And, we sometimes have arguments, we sometimes disagree, we sometimes agree, whatever it is, they are small in comparison to when you see the sadness and the refugees now in Ukraine. That breaks your heart, and you kind of need to put things in perspective. And I always tell my leadership team and my employees, let's be kind to each other. Let's solve things together that we can solve. And let's make progress on that. But let's also remember we are just running a company here, and put things in perspective.
Yeah, so I can also imagine that in these times of crisis, it's pretty lonely at the top. Who's your sounding board? Is that your partner, the board maybe, your colleagues, your children if you have them? Who do you turn to in these times?
I think we all have different places to turn to. I'm very close with my leadership team. We talk through these topics pretty much in real time. I think business runs so quickly today. So we took actions around, the people that we had in Europe. We are raising money like other companies are. We are matching donations, these sort of things where we take quick actions on. And then obviously we have a board that's also very, very engaged, that is a big advisor to me. And I think it's very important when you select, especially as a CEO, a company to work for, that you really look at that board relationship that you have, because it's so critical to have people that you really work in a trust-based relationship with. And then finally, I was lucky that I have very strong mentors especially in the tech industry that I've worked for over decades. And there's also a strong connection there. So I don't feel that lonely, and I'm quite fortunate. Yeah.
No, I'm glad to hear that. I think obviously we wish everybody all the best in these times of crisis. But indeed, we have a company to run in the meantime. That's also an obligation. And Kirsten, you're the CMO of Optimize, and as I just said, the company that helps customers unlock their digital potential. Can you, in layman's term, if you would have to explain to your grandmother what that actually means, what would you tell her?
Well, Optimize, I'm very proud that Optimizely is a global business that serves over 10,000 brands around the world. So when you think about the closest touch point to the customer is really the digital website or your mobile app for your business. Yeah. And so we provide technology that helps businesses leverage the power of digital to get closer to their customer, to know their customer, and to ultimately drive truly outsized growth for their businesses.
Can you just explain it or illustrate that with just one very simple example that anybody could understand what that exactly does? What you do for those clients?
Well, I always try to put myself in the shoes of our customer, the day of life of our customer. Yeah. So when you think about trying to get that very close one-on-one engagement with a customer on a web experience or a mobile app experience, yeah. It's actually it can be quite difficult as a marketer to understand the insights of how customers are behaving online. So we actually have a lot of data that tells us what's the next best action or the next best product to recommend to someone. So in my own life and my own personal experience as a consumer, as a working mom, when I look on different websites for products or goods and services, I'm looking for things that are tailored to me as a consumer. So what are the types of things that help me get goods for my, shopping for my family or for my kids or for myself online. So those are the types of things we optimize within the digital experience.
And
so you'll be touching the lives through your customers of millions and millions of people around the world, I'm guessing then.
Yes. Do you want to tell any?
No, I just thought one of the things I'm very proud of is, we brought actually Optimizely together through multiple different acquisitions, but our own Optimizely.com, if you go to our website, runs purely on our technology. So the site, the personalization, we test different scenarios about how do we convert customers in our funnel better. And that's all done through our own technology. And so we call it drinking our own champagne, Frank.
Yeah. Now I must say, in preparation for this session, I actually did visit and try something. I must say it felt indeed as a very, let's say, intuitive and easy experience. But I guess that's what you do for a living. Great. Well, great. Well, listen, to both of you, what I wanted to talk about in the next hour is basically three main topics. The first is leadership of transformation. The second is, since we have the both of you here, the CMO CEO collaboration and lessons learned there. And lastly, since it's the Humanizing Growth Series, I want to talk about driving more humanized growth. Is that as an agenda work for you?
Sounds great.
Yeah, cool.
We're ready.
Cool. Well, so let's start with transformation leadership. And this is a little bit of an inside question, if you will. And Alex, no doubt you'll explain. My question is, would you describe yourself as an Optinaut or as an optimizer?
That is indeed a good question. So maybe as context, we made a very transformational move in 2020, right after COVID hit, et cetera. And we went for the acquisition of a company called Optimizely. At that point, I was the CEO of a company called Ashberger. And when we brought these two companies together, we actually saw this as a unique opportunity to create a company of our own making, to really reimagine what the combined business can be. But as you bring two cultures together and two companies together, you kind of need to bring them together under one brand, under one identity, one purpose. And that's really, for me, transformational leadership, to think through how to do this. But one thing that really matters is people's identity and how people actually refer to themselves. And so the Optimize, the organization we acquired, refer to themselves as Optinauts. Yeah. And it was about kind of going to the moon and being in a space shuttle in some ways. Yeah. And it's more about where you go, kind of like we go to the moon. And I felt, we wanted to give everybody a new identity, the people from the company that was acquiring as well as the acquired company. And so there we chose the name Optimizer, because we felt that's what we do for our customers. We actually help them to optimize their results. And so it was a nuance that was different, yeah. But it was very important to create a new identity for every employee in the company. And it's interesting, you do these changes in the beginning and you see how people struggle with it, et cetera. But now, over a year in, everybody's now an optimizer. And so sometimes the changes look really, really hard when you're going through them, and they are tough, and you see Optinauts, language everywhere, et cetera. But then over time, you see you can actually drive transformation if you're consistent, if you have a compelling story. And that's obviously what Kirsten did from a whole brand architecture perspective. But it was tough in times because, again, it's people's identity, and changing people's identity is really hard. Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to come back to that journey, and especially the identity and culture piece that you talked about. But maybe also to give the viewers a little bit of context about the journey. Kirsten, could you share maybe one real like a high in the journey where you really felt, okay, this is going as I hoped it would go?
Well, I think for our audience, Frank, every CMO has a great vision. Especially if you're going through a corporate rebrand, and in our case, a complete renaming of the company, many aspects of that brand transformation. You always have a vision of what you think it's going to be, and the best laid out plan of how you're going to take a company from where you are today and how to propel them in the future. Even with the best laid plans, things can pivot and change. I think in our case, the brief when I joined the company was always very clear. From Alex, is that we wanted to reinvigorate the brand of the company. We had a much broader portfolio of digital capabilities than what the company Ashberger was known for, primarily in Europe. And we had very strong growth ambitions in North America and in APJ. So really taking on board, the global positioning of the brand and taking people through that journey. We actually launched the brand in January of 2021, the intention to rebrand and rename the company. That allowed us to brief our analyst community, our employees, our partners, our customers on the rationale for the rebrand. We actually gave ourselves about 3 months while we were moving through the core work of new brand identity, corporate positioning. We had launched our corporate values as well at the beginning of the year to get everybody on the same page, as Alex described. And then we went on a very aggressive path to consolidate the entire technology stack that was running behind the scenes of the brand, and relaunched our new corporate website in August of 2021. So it was a pretty fast path from January to August to reimagine the company vision and purpose, reset the brand identity, reset and consolidate the digital tech stack so that we could move forward into an innovation space by Q4 of last year. So it was a pretty aggressive path, but to Alex's point, the sooner we were able to do that, the better we could move our people into a place of innovation versus consolidating in the past.
So to my question, what is, if you would take a specific moment in that journey that really felt like a high, what would that be?
I would definitely say the culminating moment of our website launch. Yeah. And not just the brand launch in April, that was just like the beginning. It was actually bringing it to life through our own technology, with that milestone launch moment.
Yeah.
It was a pivotal turning point for everyone.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because everybody was working remote. We did not have a chance to bring everybody together, celebrate maybe the new brand, etc. Right. But and that's made the website so important. But we also opened up this office here in New York City and actually rebranded it. And you can't really see it super well here through the screen, but there's a painting that was done that is actually in the colors of our logo and the shape, etc. And we had actually had an office opening here. And for me, that was like one of these moments where it really came to life because now you were in a space together and you had people together. And then there was another moment just afterwards where we bought another company. And when I had the call with all the new employees that we acquired, they all had changed the background of their Zoom link to our new logo. And in that moment, it became clear to me that our logo and who we were as a company had such a drawing power that people were actually proud to be associated with that new identity. And I simply love that. And I think the logo is stunning. I think the color palette. I mean, we Kirsten and I spent time on those things together. So it's great.
Yeah, it's interesting because I thought actually the same when you said that people actually, the former Optinaut started calling themselves Optimizer. That's a real litmus test. It's the same with that Zoom background. It feels like a real litmus test. Like, are people really embracing it? And it sounds like they really did. And that's great to hear. Kirsten, obviously you're expecting, when I ask for the high of that journey, you know what the next question is going to be, right? So tell me also about some of the pitfalls, maybe some of the moments that you really struggled and the lessons, obviously, that you learned from that. Can you share one?
Yeah, as I mentioned and Alex reinforced, we rebranded a company in the middle of the pandemic, everyone working remote. I don't even recall if I had even met my leadership team in person at that point. So when you think about cultural transformational change, that is very difficult in that environment where people have a very personal association with the brand identity of the company they work for. We experienced a tremendous amount of attrition during that time. We had launched a new brand, a new corporate direction, a truly innovative product vision for the roadmap of our portfolio and our suite. And not everyone was on board from the former companies that we had acquired. And, it's as a leader, I think it's very difficult because you, of course, invest a lot of time and energy hoping that people see the potential that we see and the vision that we have for how we're going to grow and scale this and accelerate the path of this business. But not everyone shared the same vision. And so they did depart the business. At the same time, we rehired another 600 employees, not 6,000 yet, but 600 employees. Yeah. So there was just a tremendous amount of turnover. So while we had people exiting, we also had also people coming in. So being able to also onboard a large number of new employees was also an opportunity.
Yeah.
So what do you consider? What do you consider the lesson learned then? Because I understand that if you talk about lows and you talk about high attrition rates, that can feel like a real low. I think everybody can understand that. But what do you take with you as a lesson learned from that period?
I think that as a leader, really always coming back and grounding decisions, how we spend our time around the North Star of where we're bringing the company. I think just, having that as a moral compass, a leadership compass, to always come back to that, because, ultimately we all have a choice of where we want to work every single day. And so if while I wanted to bring as many people on board with us as we could, if people had made a personal choice for whatever reason in their lives that they wanted to go on a different path, we also have to respect that as leaders and also bring people in and talent in who really embrace the strategy and where we're taking the company.
Yeah, I totally relate with that so much. I remember that when we, Mark and I, started our first company, the first value of the values and guiding principles we wrote down is we're all volunteers. I think people need to want to be there, and that's dealing from a place of strength. So I can imagine how you experience that in such a volatile time, if you will. Mm-hmm. Good, thank you for sharing that. Alex, you merged two companies, but you also merged one brand, and one brand came out on top. Mm-hmm. How did that go down? Because I guess that many people felt like, either we're the winners or we're the losers. Is that how that went, and how did you manage that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I always think marketing is art and science, or gut and data kind of together. But I think both Kirsten and I felt very strongly that we needed to evolve the brand of what was Episerver anyways at one point. And so then it really became a choice, like, hey, do we think Optimize is the right name for the future business, and does it represent what we do as a company? But the nice part is, and I think it goes back to what Kirsten just said about this North Star and being consistent. We did a bunch of work on understanding the digital gravity of our brand. A lot of data behind it. So you kind of need to give everybody context for changes that you make. Change is always hard in some ways or form, but if you give context, if you understand the rationale behind it, then it becomes much easier to stand behind the change. And then you need to just be consistent, and you need to keep going. And I think as a team, we were very aligned on the fact that we said, like, look, we want to move this company to be a global player. We want to go into the US. We believe the future is around digital optimization. We believe the name Optimize is better for it. We know that the search traffic is there. We know that the website is frequent, and we understand the demand gen numbers, etc. And all of those things made it ultimately a very data-driven decision in one way, but also a very much a decision that felt good for the gut. And if I have a decision where my gut tells me this thing and the data tells me this, then I'm very, very strongly behind it. And then when your own passion is there and you actually translate it into work that actually takes people along on the journey, you can get through these changes. So people actually I don't think people really felt so much as winners and losers. I think ultimately people felt like, hey, this is a new company, We did not try to say like one company was acquiring the other. We felt more like this is a moment to reset the entire business.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what I also hear you say is that the fact that it was really data-driven made it explainable, made it maybe feel in the gut right, like you said, but also from the mind. There was a story that you could explain. So what you say in a merger like this, it's vision first or culture first? Is it what you want to achieve, or who you want to achieve it with, and how you want to work first? Yeah,
that's a great question. The chicken and the egg question. I do think in this case it was more the vision first, to say like, look, this is who we want to become. And then to Kirsten's point, I mean, we are living through the Great Resignation. All companies probably also watching have the same challenges. Every company I speak to, etc. But you want people on the bus basically that are there for the right reason. Yeah. And so when we explained what we want to do as a company, who we do this for, what our vision is for the business, that's when we attracted the people we really want to have there. And the culture kind of forms itself through the people that we obviously hire and the behaviors that you illustrate every day. And I'm very proud of the kind of company we are. And also the one that we are becoming, because we continue to evolve. It's not static. The culture evolves every single day in terms of who we are, the behaviors, etc. And we all learn from each other. For me as a CEO, the most important part is that we're actually a learning organization, that we continuously learn to get better, because we are never done. This is one of our values actually as a company, and one of our behaviors. And I truly believe that's the case in business.
Kirsten, you mentioned we're very purpose-led. So let me ask the same question I asked to Alex, but add a dimension. You have the what, the vision, if you will. You have the how, which is the culture. Then you have the why. Where does it all, how do you see that? Is there an order there?
Well, we, as I think back to our brand transformation, we also partnered really closely with our chief people officer on developing our culture and values and principles. Again, Alex, I think, stated it really succinctly that we are creating a new company, but built on the foundation of a lot of great history and success. But we're creating a new company, a new company culture. So we also had a lot of grassroots feedback and input from employees to inform where we were going on the brand. And we have active participation from employees all over the world in employee resource groups, really active engagement on a whole variety of topics. This is probably not unfamiliar to many people watching today, but mental health, sustainability, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have a military veterans group. We have our Black Panthers group. There new grassroots groups crop up all the time. And what's also exciting, Frank, is that when you can see the passion people have for how they can leverage our community within our company to actually do greater good in their local communities, I think is just very inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to create a platform for that type of engagement so we can extend the value of what we do for our businesses out into the world.
So actually, quite a few leaders that we've had in this series talked about purpose. And then, like you said, well, we're a very purpose-led business. But they also talked about their own personal purpose and how important it was, not only that it matched for them, but actually that I remember Hubert Joly, the former CEO of Best Buy, who talked about doing sessions with 300,000 employees that all went through, let's say, the exercise of matching what their own purpose was, and maybe not even with that word, but just what they wanted in life and how they wanted to contribute and how that matched in their role. Is that something that in a B2B environment like Optimizely, Kirsten, you would say is also relevant or less so?
Yeah, absolutely. I think throughout my career, I've always believed that if you can connect your personal passion to the business strategy, there are infinite possibilities of creativity and growth that you can achieve on a personal level and on a professional level in terms of impact you can make within the business. The example I'll give, Frank, within our own business context is, I'm a cancer survivor. I came out of that experience with a deep, deep personal passion for sustainability and health in our global supply chains, but also in the context of our marketing community, how through technology can we give people back precious time? Yeah. I am so passionate about the focus people can have on their families, their health, their loved ones, which is truly the most important thing when the chips are down, I can say from experience. So when you think about in our industry, all of the content that's produced that never gets consumed, mm-hmm. all of the effort we place on creative that maybe didn't drive an actual impact or a growth objective for a business. And so I think about all of the creativity, the passion, the energy that people have put into that work, but it didn't actually make an impact and it didn't drive an outcome. I think through the power of data and insights, now we are in a point in our industry where we can now infuse that intelligence into the creative process, into the work. So we know every single day as marketers, so when we come to work, we know what we're creating will have an impact. And to me, that's how I think about, how do I connect my own personal passion to what I do every single day, how I can better inform the product roadmap and what we're delivering to our customers. Because ultimately, I want to give everybody that precious time back to lead a healthy, happy life.
Well, great. Alex, is that something you also, like your personal purpose in life, is that something you would talk about with your colleagues?
Yeah, I think I think it's as Kirsten said. I mean, purpose is so critical for motivation across the entire across the employees. Different employees, and I think different people get that sense of purpose from different places. For instance, we work with the Red Cross together. We support organizations like the World Wildlife Fund. For many people, that's part of the purpose. Yesterday was International Women's Day. We have one of our colleagues who shares, actually, is the president of the Women in Tech Association, and she uses her platform within Optimizely to actually also talk about equality and women in business. So there's so many ways you can actually connect what you do on a day. And I think it has to do with fulfillment. It's not the paycheck that motivates people. It's the combination of, your compensation, other pieces, et cetera. And you want to see what your company does. That's why I think as a CEO, you oftentimes start to have to take position on topics that you might be uncomfortable with. But I think organizations are simply more than just, there's obviously a profit motive and a value motive and all of those things, but there's much, much more to it today. And, for me personally, I'm very humbled by the opportunity to have a platform as a CEO to talk about things. And I take that very seriously, to use that platform to promote causes that I believe in, and they can be very local. I mean, I was just doing a polar plunge last week.
We can't forget that.
Yes, in Minneapolis, I jumped into ice cold water. We raised money for the Special Olympics.
I saw that.
Yes. So there's a lot of that's part that I enjoy a lot. I enjoy that human connection with people and doing things like this together. And it might not, change the world or something, but just a little bit that you can give. And it's much more
funny. What strikes me, Alex, is that people, when they talk about purpose, they talk about impact on community, charities they do, and so on. Whereas at the same time, I think, and I've always felt for myself, that in a role like yours, just creating a safe environment where people can grow, that in itself is already very purposeful, right? Yeah,
very much so. I mean, we have, I just had a conversation with a trans employee, With a trans, a transsexual employee who told me about a previous employer where she couldn't be, they couldn't be the person they wanted to be, and that's really, it really puts that in perspective, Frank, because you think about, the environment that you create, and it made me very proud that we do this as a company. And it's sometimes maybe shocking or surprising that other companies have a very different policy, very different views. And so I agree with you, Frank. That's definitely something that strikes me as well.
Yeah, and I agree with you that it's surprising that there's companies out there that seem to, at least in the short term, do really well and create an environment where people indeed can't be themselves or can't grow. Well, maybe related to that, I wanted to talk about your collaboration, or actually more broadly about the collaboration between a CMO and a CEO in general. Kirsten, I'm Dutch, and they're notoriously Dutch direct. What is it like for you to work with people coming from Germany?
Well, I think I've always been choiceful about the companies and businesses I've worked for. In terms of working for a global company, I've always been, I guess, have a global mindset in terms of the type of environment I want to work in. And so working with Alex, we've worked together for many years. I don't want to say how many years, Alex, because it starts to date us a little bit. We worked together a few businesses back when Alex was the president of Ariba, which was SAP's supply chain and global business network company. So we had a history before coming into this role, and I would say that was really, really important given the transformational work that we just talked about. I think I entered into the job with a high degree of trust from Alex, which was paramount given the transformation that I had to lead the company through. So I think just at at a core level of what I walked into, I don't think I could have moved as fast or as quickly if we hadn't had such a tight alignment of vision, direction, what success looks like. We were able to hit the ground running very fast. So nothing was lost in translation from a German native, but who is a global citizen, I would say. Alex is one of the most fascinating leaders that I've ever worked with.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Yeah. So if you say more in general, because trust, I hear you clearly. You said trust helped, let's say, pave the way and helped you hit the ground running. Would you say in general that's, let's say, one of the most critical conditions for an effective CMO CEO collaboration?
Do you want me to start? I think there's,
Sure.
Throughout the journey, Frank, I know we don't want to paint that everything's always rosy. There's always highs and lows as we go through a transformation like we have done. Mm-hmm. And I think, Alex and I have made it a point to just have really regular touch points on the critical topics that we need to work together to move us through to get to the next phase. Mm-hmm. Going through the work that we did, we had different periods where, we had operational roadblocks or dependencies within other business partner relationships that our team has with other parts of the business, in sales operations, in finance, in HR. Marketing is one of those functions that touches and supports every single aspect of the business. And so, as we're going through the work that we had to accomplish last year, there were definitely critical points where, taking the time to step back on giving true headspace and time to understand the background and details of the environment that we were trying to break through to get to the next level of scale. Those were points that we had, whether that was on, technology integration or process and change management, lots of things that I think we just try to stay lockstep and address them right away, get clarity right away on alignment so we can move forward. Yeah. I don't know if you'd like to.
No, I think, for me, it kind of starts with do you actually value the function of marketing or not?
Well, Alex, you won't find a better CEO.
First it starts there. Do you believe in marketing and do you believe in that? But, we have not talked about one of the big, elephants in the room, which is ultimately marketing needs to create demand for the business. Yeah. And the B2B world, that's super, super critical for me, that ultimately pipeline and opportunities are our lifeblood. Yeah. And so, we talked a lot about the brand. We talked a lot about the transformation. That's kind of nearly the
table stakes.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. And
foundation.
That's a foundation. But in some ways, imagine a board that you work with. And you look at your marketing budget and where do you spend it and what's the return on the investments. These are the conversations where these things become a lot more serious, where you think about hey, that's what we want to do on the brand side, but we also want to drive demand for the business. And there are moments where, especially when you acquire companies, systems don't work with each other, leads are being named differently. Yeah. The metrics don't always look up to the right, etc. And you're thinking oh my goodness, what's happening? And that's where really I think trust is being built, which is do we stick together? Do we actually, have the same perspective about what we're doing? My belief is always you need the brand to be the halo effect for the entire business. And it's tough to be pinpointing where demand comes from sometimes, but you need a good brand story. Yeah. And then obviously you need to have a great cadence about the operations of the business. And Kirsten is one of those few leaders who actually can do brand and demand and operations together. Yeah. But that's the part where sometimes, really talking very honestly, where sometimes the pressure is the highest is because you need to show results, and then you can't just say hey, our logo is pretty or something. That's not a result. The result is hey, show me the dollar and cents in terms of what are we driving for the business. And I think that's where I think, again, the trust really comes in between the CMO and the CEO, is to say, like, look, how do we ensure that with the rest of the leadership team, we have complete alignment on driving results for the business?
Yeah, it's funny because there's research by one of our partners, Spencer Stewart, that says that of all the people in the board, the CMO typically has the shortest tenure. Actually, only a third of that of a CFO. That's like really worrying. But also it says that the main reason for that is lack of alignment in expectations. What do you expect? And by the sound of it, the two of you, I mean, it's almost like how you're sitting shoulder to shoulder. Like it's not opposite each other, but next to. But that's, I mean, almost like illustrative of what you're saying, right? You're very clear, and you have been very clear to Kirsten what your expectation is. It's not just a pretty logo; it's also demand.
Yeah. I mean, the ultimate measure of our success is growing the business, and we work together to ensure that all the strategies that we have in place drive that outcome.
Yeah. And it's funny, Kirsten, because you said, I work very closely together with different functions. We had, a while back, we had Angela Ahrens also in this series, and she was talking about this, and she said, especially the CMO of today, and even more so the CMO of tomorrow, should be joined at the hip with strategy, with the CHRO, with the CFO, because you're very much the spider in the web, because you've got all these different stakeholders. And traditionally, it's been marketing who's been the eyes and ears of all these different stakeholders. By the sound of it, you're spending quite a bit of time also with your peers of other functions. Absolutely.
I think, when I take the role of creating the absolute best positioning for our company and our portfolio solutions to drive enterprise value very seriously. How we drive value and how we drive growth, integrated business strategy is really crucial. So I spent a lot of time working on our alignment between our product management and product development teams and what's coming in the roadmap, together with our go-to-market and our sales organization, and alignment in the field of what the reality is in the local markets because of the competitive pressures in each market, and how are we lining those up, and then aligning on what are the critical innovations that we're going to launch over the next subsequent quarters and into the 2023. So I spent a lot of time there. We've talked a lot about people and culture, that alignment with HR. The finance partnership and collaboration is truly crucial. When you think about a marketer's ability to spend efficiently, to manage strategic relationships within our agency ecosystem effectively, those are critical relationships that help us drive growth at speed and scale. So, close alignment with other business partners is just crucial. In order to prioritize effort and, how do we break down what can be very complex initiatives into quarterly success on a shared vision of what a roadmap looks like.
But that sounds like you've got a huge responsibility that touches all these different functions, but you probably won't have the authority over these different functions. So how do you avoid that they perceive marketing interfering in their function rather than, because it's only natural, right? That's how many people think, let me do my job and don't bother me. So how do you deal with that, the potential risk of that dynamic?
Yeah, it's delicately, Frank. I think, ultimately, I think it's pivoting the organization, Frank, to understanding that marketing serves a critical business role in driving growth for the business. And then bringing other business partners along of how do they share in that success. We all have, getting to where you have mutual understanding of the role we all play in achieving the ambition for the company and making clear. And what those
give an example of that, because I think this is critical what you're saying.
Yeah, just the account. Like, let's not mistake the difference between business partnering and good relationships with people because we like each other and we have good communications with one another with true accountability. Yeah. And I think that, definitions of how each function participate into coming together to drive that success is where things can break down in the trust and the relationship. So, I think so for example, working really closely with our product teams and our sales teams on what innovations are we going to prioritize to maximize growth. Those are alignment conversations that are, we actually there's four critical functions. There's product, there's product and product strategy, there's our sales and go-to-market organizations, and then marketing, like all joined up to align on the key priorities for growth. So that's one example. I don't know if you want to share. No,
pipeline generation is a good example. We set goals for the growth of the company, and then ultimately sales has a component, our partner team has a component, and channels organization, marketing as a component. Ultimately, what I always try to do, Frank, is just to ensure that the entire group sees what do we achieve as a goal as a company. Sometimes for me, it's less relevant if it comes from this person or that person. I care for the fact that the total outcome is there. But ultimately, Kirsten needs to ensure that we work as a team together and have clearly accountable owners of different pieces of that pipeline. And then how do we actually support each other? Because again, you don't want to get to a finger pointing culture where somebody says like, oh, I couldn't do something because marketing didn't give me the support there. I needed the support over there. And that, I think Kirsten is very, very good, for instance, at stakeholder management and reaching out and building bridges across the organization. But you need bridge builders when you're in a role like marketing. It can't be like, oh, and the priorities also change. So a plan starts in a year and then suddenly we say like, oh, we just opened an office in Dubai. We didn't have Dubai in the plan 6 months before. We did it because we had a great opportunity there suddenly. And then you need to allocate resources differently. You need to suddenly do an event in Dubai. You need to organize it, etc. And then I expect flexibility. But then maybe the US team will then say like, oh, I didn't get my event over here. And then you need to manage and work with somebody. But that's, I think that's honestly blocking and tackling that we all need to do as part of our jobs. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
No. So also, you're saying things that are happening like in different places in the world and the way you react to them. We started this conversation talking about what's happening in the world and some of the major crises that we're confronted with. In our leadership program that Kirsten participated in, one of the let's say, base modules was what we call decoding the world. Because that's typically a marketer's responsibility to be the eyes and ears, if you will, of the company and basically represent the receiving end perspective of all the different stakeholders. Now, in a time like this, I asked you, who's your sparring partner? In times like these, is that, like, for example, do you need to take a stance? Is that things that you would typically seek the CMO or marketing for as a sparring partner?
Yeah, but potentially. Ultimately, not only. I think ultimately, it's a broader conversation. I like to be more inclusive there rather than make it a functional piece. When it comes, for instance, to topics, especially when it comes to topic about, like, let's say, gender equality and other topics. Obviously, for me, it's important to have a perspective as Kirsten's perspective. From a market perspective, in terms of what happens in the world, we have regional teams, regional marketing leaders, for instance, but also regional sales leaders, where obviously we get perspective from. So it kind of, for me, always has to do a little bit like who is closest to understanding what's actually going on. And right now we live in a world, Frank, where there's so many things happening and everybody seems to be an expert on everything suddenly. And we have a view as a company that we want to make marketing more science-driven, ultimately, more data-driven, et cetera. And I believe also as a CEO, I don't want to just make assumptions about something. I need to educate myself beforehand before I actually make a decision on something. And for me, obviously, marketing has a critical role to understand the landscape, to give perspective. But one of the things, that's what we work on as a team, is to be less assumption driven. If I go out there and we actually make a corporate decision on something, that's a significant move, and I want to make it based on the right data points.
Yeah, interesting what you say about so being data-driven in your choices. Yesterday, we had a session with our Challenger Board, the IRG Challenger Board. It's a younger generation, great thinkers from all over the world. And Raul Morano, who is basically a strategist at ING, the bank, who is very much about data-driven strategy and so on. He said, Frank, with what's happening in the world now, it's not only about being data-driven, it's also about being values-driven. Mm-hmm. For example, do we do business with companies in Russia? Showing your true colors in big topics, whether they're about equality or whether they're about climate or partners you would or would not work with. How do you see that? So you've got data-driven, and I hear you loud and clear. How do you see the fact that what he said, we're past the stage that these are personal. Companies need to show their colors. They need to take stance. Do you agree with that, or is that less so maybe in the B2B?
I mean, I think it's a great point. I mean, I think there's just a moral compass we all have. I mean, if you look at the killing of George Floyd, for instance, this was an example where there was really there's no data that you need to look at. You see a crime was committed, and you basically have to take a stance as a company, to support that Black Lives Matter, et cetera, and all of those things. But there are topics that get way more complicated than that as well. And so it depends really on the topic. But I agree with the fact that as organizations and also the employees, your stakeholders, they really expect it from you as a company. We stopped our activities in Russia the moment the war started. I mean,
ahead of the pack.
Yeah, I mean, exactly right at the moment, at the first weekend where it happened on Monday, we stopped, our business there. So, I think that's, so again, I think the point is very well said, that it's a combination really about that moral compass that you have, because otherwise you can't live with yourself, if you do something. But, there's been topics, including, how you deal, for instance, with the pandemic, that were a lot more complicated, and you have a lot more employees, and you have a lot of different people inside a company. And you have, and sometimes things get too far out of proportion as well. I, for instance, have done business in Russia for years prior, et cetera. I have friends in Russia. There are many, many good human beings in Russia who don't want this war, And so as much as we talk about Ukraine, we also have to talk about, Russian people who are hurt by this and so on. And sometimes in communication, you can come across very one-sided, and sometimes that's more nuanced. But I totally agree with the moral piece on top of the data. Absolutely.
And Kirsten, would you say as a CMO, is there indeed a shift happening that's irreversible? Like, is taking position, taking stance on things happening in the world become a bigger part of your job?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what is very challenging for marketers is, to deliver a campaign, to drive an event. We need a lot of runway. You need a lot of advanced preparation time in general. And so when you think about even our physical footprint of our event strategy coming for later this year, the issues and what's happening in Europe absolutely have an impact in how we're thinking about our plans that we are committed to. But we also know we have to create the flexibility in our models also to allow us to pivot at the last minute in some cases, depending on what is happening around us. So we want to proceed with clear direction for our teams, clear, committed strategy, for how we're proceeding and executing throughout the year. But we also have to, bear in mind the broader contextual things that are happening, because we have to be prepared. We have to be prepared for any of these social, economic, or geopolitical issues that may have to that may require us to make changes in the moment.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's interesting, because we help companies actually understand their customer behaviors better and actually adapt to change. And so for us, the technology we provide obviously helps companies, actually deal with changing market conditions, because change is the only constant there. And I think for us as a company, it's important. People can read opinions about political opinions, other things on other places. That's not our job. Our job is I think from a marketing perspective and so on, when we think about what content we create, we won't start creating content about who is at fault in the war, or this or that. That's not what we do. But what we can do is we can talk to companies about something happens. How quickly can you respond as a company? A simple example, for instance, is, in the moment something happens in Ukraine, we had to put up a banner to talk about our security of our website, etc. And there was immediately a banner up. There was within 12 hours we had this up, etc. I go to other websites, you read nothing about what they're doing in terms of their preparedness, because some of them don't have the speed to market and the agility. So that's where we want to help companies with. So I think it's important that you as a company, you think about what can I contribute to this conversation that's actually meaningful, versus trying to take political stances and other things, which nobody comes to optimize.com to find out about our political stance, on a topic. But I think it's more important that we think about what can we do to support, elevate the humanitarian crisis. What can we do for companies to be better prepared for changes that happen in their life? That's our job.
It's actually, I think there's a parallel with what we were talking about earlier, where yes, you can help the Red Cross and do good community work, but probably the most purposeful thing you do is create an environment where people can thrive, your colleagues and the partners of those colleagues. And it seems the same with these political issues. You can give your opinion, but probably better to see how you can create real value and play a meaningful role through the core of your business. But I do want to ask Kirsten, and we're going to close in just a few minutes, but one more question, because I really liked what Alex was saying about the moral compass, that ultimately we're humans. And somebody was talking to me, said, well, Frank, stop thinking about B2C or B2B companies, because we're all human to human companies. As a marketer, how does that impact how you lead your team and how you do your job well?
Well, I think, we, through our work, is about how do we best know our customer. And if you think about all of the, technology tools, data that we have at our disposal, I think we're now at a place where we actually can harness that, and it helps us to prioritize and focus on what is the next best content or next best action that our customers can take so that they can quickly adapt to change. That's our job. And so, I really try to keep that, while we can, keep at the core for our team, that let's never forget the humanity of our work as well, which is on great storytelling through the voices of our customers. And how do we bring that to life through our brand and our digital experience and all of our customer touch points? And never forget that when we can tap into people's motivations and what we personally aspire to achieve, we can really create just incredible experiences for our customers. So try to keep everyone focused on, really the heart of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, so it's basically what you're saying. That's very much the core and the essence of what marketing is all about in the first place, right? Understanding your target audience and catering for their needs. Yeah. Hey, we're almost done. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. And I think there were actually quite a few real, let's say, actionable learnings. You shared some, I think, some experiences and how you approach them, I think will be very valuable to the people listening and watching today. But before we go, if I'd ask you one call to action or one thing you would really want the audience to take away around the topics we discussed today, what would those be? And I'll first go with you, Alex.
I mean, besides that, you should always keep your CMO close. And, that's obviously believe in the power of marketing and good storytelling and all of that. I think the part that I kind of maybe going all the way back to the beginning, I do think with everything that happens around us, I think it really is important that we keep in mind that this notion about humanizing what we do to all stakeholders is really, really important. I mean, it sometimes resets everything. And so that notion about kindness, the notion about actually showing each other gratitude, the notion about putting things in perspective, that's what I've been thinking a lot about, Frank, recently. I enjoyed this conversation a lot. You asked excellent questions, and it's really good to have this sort of conversation, and I'm very grateful to be here. So that's...
Thank you very much. And I couldn't agree more with your key takeout. Kirsten.
I would say, CMO to CMO, don't be afraid to have those tough conversations with your CEO. I have found that the sooner I have conversations with Alex about what may be holding me or my team back, it actually advances the strategy and thinking even quicker. So I would advise my peers to, harness your position in your company as the growth leader for the business, partner with your CEO to have those tough conversations, and keep moving the business forward.
Great. Well, I mean, it was great. I think you demonstrated exactly that, both of you, actually. So a big thank you. And to all viewers from all around the world, great to have had you here with us today. Looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks again. And for now, I wish you a beautiful day. Goodbye.
Bye.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Well done.
All right. Thanks, Alex.